Welcome to MSP Unplugged. I'm your host, Paco LeBron. This is the place to learn how to run your MSP, whether you're a nimble MSP or leading a team for the journey. This is the place for you. Let me go ahead and introduce my co-host. We have none other than Mr. Rick Smith over at Renactance Technology. Rick, how are you doing today, my friend?
Doing good, doing good. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone. I hope you had a good Thanksgiving, ate good, got to relax. Hope you didn't spend a ton of stuff, ton of money today on Black Friday deals, but I'm doing good. Looking forward to this episode.
And for those that may not be observing the holiday, hope you're having a short Friday and going into to a nice weekend here. Over here in Chicago, it is 30 degrees and Black Friday sales are all over the place. So for those that don't know what that is the retail holiday that seems to get everybody in a crazy sense. But we're gonna dive right into some good content that we got right here. Um, we normally start this off with a tip, trick, or story. However, what we are going to do is we're going to highlight three questions that we saw this week from our community this week. And the first question is going to be from a member of our community group. The comment specifically says, recovered from turkey coma and thinking about clients right now, which I don't know why you're thinking about clients right now, but I totally understand your commitment to your craft and I commend you for that. It goes on to say, I've noticed more tickets coming in about browser hijacking and the associated issues. Other than filtered DNS or DNS filtering, what is everyone doing to mitigate this issue, especially for home and small users? So I'll go ahead and throw it over to you, Rick. Are you doing anything other than DNS filtering? Is this becoming a more and more thing you're seeing for your clients? Anything to add on to that question?
Well, my honestly, I haven't been doing anything extra. I have not seen too much. I've not gotten any complaints about DNS filtering or about browser hijacking. So we haven't found a need to do anything extra. Now that's just us. Maybe it's just something in the setup we're doing now. Um, now, and again, the second part of that is this: we do not have any home users, right? So I noticed the question did say, particularly for home users, we do have some small business users who work from home. Um, Now, but we have their setup more so on a basically as if they were, a business running a business. So that would mean basically no Windows Home. You have to have the certain meet our certain criteria to take our basically have to take our plan in order to be a client of ours, even if you're a small home based business. So I don't necessarily, and I'm sorry that I don't necessarily have any things of what else could be done because we just basically haven't run into it right now.
Sure. No, no, and and that's fair. I think this is something that has been going on for quite some time, but every experience is going to be different, right? And so, like for us on our side, what we've done over the last couple years is, we have DNS filtering as mentioned in the comments. So we actually utilize depending on the client size. If it's a home user and it's someone that we haven't used in quite some time or we haven't supported in quite some time, or even internally for some of my own family members, we'll do is just use this normal quad nine. We'll do quad nine, the two DNS entries into all of the devices, all of the networking, things of that nature. Obviously, there are other great solutions out there, such as DNS Filter, Zorus, etc., to name a few. No affiliate to the show, but they have been partners over the years for MSP Unplugged. I also have heard there are specific browser type software that are locking down the browser itself. Um, there was a vendor that a colleague of mine was using for a little bit. They were very early stages. I'm not sure where they are right now. I think the vendor was named Conceal, if I remember
Can see
correctly.
yes.
So we'll get that information, and then obviously we'll enter this information over in the Facebook group where we have that as well. But for us specifically, for like our business clients, how we kind of battle this is, you know, the comment specifically is browser hijacking and associated issues, right? So you just can't unfortunately train a user to not click on a button, right, or click on a link. You can try the best, but even sometimes the best can be overlooked, a busy day, things of that nature. So obviously we have the DNS filtering. We do have the safe links that is enabled in the Microsoft environment. That is something that we enable inside of all of our clients because they all have been Microsoft 365 Business Premium licensing. So it allows us to enable some additional items that you might not have that you would on standard. And then ultimately, what we have moving forward from there is we have third-party software. One of those Huntress, which will allow us to essentially quote unquote monitor the identity of that user. So again, when it comes to associated issues where browser hijack may be a thing, when that happens, this software will take a look at 2 points in time. Obviously, if there's impossible travel or weird anomalies that are not whitelisted from inside of the system of, in our case, Huntress, it will lock the system down, right? Or it'll lock that user down. So these are some of the automations and things that we've put in some of those things, but that's how we've kind of behaved on some of those. But for those that are listening, we'd love to hear what you are doing as well. So go
I do
ahead, Rick.
want to point out one other thing I was thinking about. Make sure for every client you take away admin rights so that they cannot install software. Because a lot of times too, browser hijacking comes from extensions, right? Client goes to install something that they download and they don't read the fine print and continue to just click yes. And then you end up with the program you thought you were getting and then 5 other extensions that have been added on as well. And that sometimes can, can add to this headache. So take away admin rights and then let a client have to come to you for well, this is the way it should be anyway, so that they have to come to you for those things so that they get installed safely. Now, if you use something, I'm just going to throw it out there. I know there's other programs, but something that will help you, like, like auto elevate or something in that nature where you get a notification and they can make that decision. It's probably easier and better than the client getting frustrated having to call you or put in a ticket because it'll do it automatically for you. But I do think that is one of the things we should do, because clients do not read. No one reads the fine print, really, right? So when you agree to install something, sometimes you're agreeing to install a whole bunch of other things, which does lead to browser hijacking.
Yep. No. So would love to hear what you all are doing as well. Feel free to either comment on that post on our community group or feel free to shoot us an email at info@mspunplugged.com. And we'd love to discuss that solution as you have as well. Second question we got from the community is, and this was a timely one from last month, but it's still kind of going on. I think there's a lot of resources and supply demand is causing a little bit delay. But the next question was, what are you charging for Windows 10 to Windows 11 migration/updates? Are you flat rating it or are you doing it hourly? I'm gonna go ahead and toss it back to you, Mr. Smith. What are you doing for your Windows 10, Windows 11 migrations? Are you still doing those, or are they still lingering? What's the story on that side of the house?
Of course, we're still doing them. No matter how much we said from this time last year, we were not going to be doing them this time of year. We're still doing them, even though we, notify clients this time last year about this coming in October of 2025. We still have people who's lingered. Things have happened. We've had to get new machines. All of these different things. So that has it's still going on. So here's what we did, and I'll just put it this way: we started at a discounted price if you did it earlier in the year. So like the first quarter of 2025, you got it at a discounted rate. Each quarter as we got closer, the price went up. So we finally got to our normal rate. So I guess the charging portion of this is whatever you charge. We did it as a project, right? Because some machines we just found it was easier just to wipe the drive, reinstall Windows 11. Others it was, because of the headache it was going to cause, you needed to just go ahead and upgrade it. Which in the upgrades could most of the time is going to take 3 times as long as just the drive wipe. But just depend. That was a case by case basis we made based on clients, based on circumstances. And then as you got out, and I think I mentioned this somewhere along the line, when we got to September, when we knew it was 1 month out, we basically were charging double because now is an emergency, right? So at this point now, we are back to as of November 15th, we are back to our normal rate, but we are now, it's not such a rush anymore for us. Like we did what we could to get everyone done by the 15th. And And so now we're back to our normal rate. So again, it's a project rate for us. We didn't do that hourly. And of course, yes, some of these would take longer than others, but we just did it all as a project rate.
Gotcha. Yeah, so it's interesting, right? So before we used to just run through the upgrades, we put in some markup on our PCs and kind of just run it through from there, right? Now with the acquisition of Prodigy Techs and now kind of running through MSP Owners Group, I'm learning a lot more new things, especially from some of our great constituents over at the Houston office for us at Cool Technology Group. And so what we're doing specifically is just um, we're marking up, which I found out that markup and margin are two different things. And so we're marking up the system or the equipment by 30%, and then we're adding 2.5 hours to the actual laptop itself. So we're working it inside of the fee itself of that laptop for the preparation, which was something we've never done. We've never charged the quote unquote onboarding fee for a client. Now, if the client decides they want to go ahead and purchase the systems themselves, they're more than welcome to, but there is an onboarding fee, which is that 2.5 hours of labor that's rolled into at the end of their invoice for each system that goes on. So that's how we've done it. That's what we're charging on our side. So it's quote unquote a flat fee based on the way that we're charging our hourly rate. And if it's a completely new system, we go from there. However, a new thing that we're doing now is we are now introducing a 3-year life cycle management for all of our clients. So in the contracts, in our conversations, every 3 years, you're going to get a new system. And so the way that we're doing it that way is we're providing them financing options. So now we're actually financing systems for our clients. They're paying a monthly fee. Once those 3 years, or depending on what length of the term is, then they would swap those out for the next 3 years. And that's how we kind of keep that going on. And it's to a point where, for us, what we don't know, and that's the goal of having Mr. Chris Cool come on the show here soon to kind of educate us on how a lot of those things can go about, and all of us can take advantage of some on the way that we do some of those things as well. So that's kind of the little bit difference of what we're doing, but as in regards to what we're doing to charging for Windows 10 to Windows 11, that's kind of our whole 360 experience going on now that we're at Prodigy Techs. So next, which is going to lead into our topic for the episode, is this was a comment that was left on one of the episodes that we have released. Happened to be running through our analytics, found the actual question, and I thought, you know what, this is a great time because we just didn't have the time to do our fourth quarter living series this year, and this kind of encompasses that a little bit on what we're trying to do. And so the question is, something I would love to see discussed is how do you transition from a full-time job to running your own MSP? And I think this is a question that we get a lot often, but sometimes we tend to, there's different ways of answering this, right? A lot of people would go ahead and answer and kind of go through their entire journey, what they've gone through, things of that nature. And that's what we're going to do here, because, we just are two talking heads and we just love to talk about ourselves, which is the lie, but, to garner the history and our experiences. But what we're going to do is we're actually going to do a past, present, and future. And the ideal of what we're going to do is we're going to go through our stories of how we went from full-time, what I call W-2, or full-time job, into running our own MSP. But we're going to also dive in, what if we were going to do that now? And how do we go ahead, and if we were going to start an MSP now, and then moving forward, if it was future tense, let's say several years or maybe 18 to 24 months from now, it's going to look completely different than where we are right now. What would you do if you were in the world of MSP 5.0? And what would you do to run an MSP at that point, right? So, Rick, I think you've shared your story before a few times, but why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit specifically on kind of what was the mindset, how you even thought about going into leaving your full-time job, and then what made you make the jump, and then how did you able to kind of, stay on the waters as much as possible so that you can make it as stable to continue running that MSP as you have been for today.
Okay, well, a couple of disclosures. It was a cold day in 2003 when this idea came about, right? So there was no MSP, or I didn't had no clue what an MSP was. There was no chat GPT to help me figure it out. You know, there were resources to help me run a business, which I cannot say didn't exist. What happened though is I didn't know how to get to those resources, right? Or how to use those resources or how to access those resources. Now, we've talked about this before. I come from a corporate background, kind of had to make a choice of relocate to a place I didn't want to go or take a package and move on. I took a package and moved on. Then I'm stuck with, my wife at the time knew it was miserable. So she was like, you need to do your own thing. She was already an entrepreneur doing her own thing. And she was like, you need to not be miserable. Don't be miserable. It falls down on everybody. So,
And to be clear, you were working at a Fortune 100, Fortune 500 company. This wasn't a
correct.
small business you were leaving. This was actually an established business that was a great financial and benefits package. It wasn't like you're transitioning to something that would be similar because you thought you could do it better. This was a whole
Absolutely.
different avenue of what you were trying to do.
Right. Now I had to, that's absolutely right. Yeah. It was a real, real, yeah, a Fortune 100 company, actually a Fortune 10 company, I think. But anyway, the idea behind it was that, at this point, I didn't know what an MSP was, but I was in the computers anyway, like in the building and basically at this point, I'm thinking I'm going to be Michael Dell and just start building computers and make a ton of money that way. Right. But that worked its way into just basically fixing computers and building, individual rigs for people who gamed or who, did other stuff, who needed something specific, or I was doing this on the side anyway, right? If people have problems, they come to me. I'd fix it. So I turned that, said, okay, let's take that, which I enjoy, into, and actually I'm going to post a picture in the Facebook page, in the Facebook group of me in my basement with my daughter as we started the business. Don't laugh at me. And the way I looked then, I was a much more svelte guy than I am now. But anyway, so started the business that way. It started as a break fix, and I did that for a very long time. It was a decent living. It was we did a lot of work. Like, I learned more and more as I go on how to run a business, right? And this was the mistake. I'm just gonna point it out this way, because when we talk about past, present, future, if I would have done it today, I would have done it a lot different. And when I would have understood more about the business aspect of running a business, as opposed to just saying, I'm going to run a break fix shop and just, fix people's computers, because there's a whole nother side of that I come to learn, which became my Achilles heel in growth. So, but that's how I started. I started that way as a break fix, all the way up until I actually met you guys, really, and started watching the show when you guys were the Computer Business Podcast. And then I started, is when I first heard that term MSP, which is crazy, but it's when I first heard it. And in 2015, when I knew it was time to make that switch, I changed the name of the company, revamped, and became a break fix shop. And became an MSP full fledged. So that's kind of the abbreviated story of it, to not get in too deep on it. But that's where we started. And I guess once we get to that point, I will talk about where we are now, but also if I started today, what would be different and how I would do it differently.
Sure. No, that makes sense. For me, how I jumped from one to the other, it just happened to be by circumstance. So, you know, I actually had my business 3 years prior to leaving to go full time. And so I was running it on the side part time for 3 years. It was a break fix shop, computer repair shop. It was, I had a virtual office with Regis, which now is known as IWG, and got a office that was about 15 minutes away from my job. I would go ahead and have people drop off the computers to get repaired, do all that sort of deal. So that's how I was running it for those 3 years part time. And so I was probably making about anywhere between, I'd say, uh, between 18 to about 20 to $22,000 a year. So it was a good part-time income at the time. You're talking what, 10, almost 10 years ago, maybe even more than that. And so I knew, okay, well, I've maxed out what I can do part-time. I have to go full time, but I'm nervous. I don't know if I should do this, things of that nature, right? And so for us, what I did was um, I had transitioned to another automotive, or well, I was working for an automotive software firm. I moved to a pharmaceutical software firm, and I said, okay, I'm going to take the 2 years that I leave from there and pay off as much debt as I possibly can, and then I know I'm going to leave in 2 years. Well, I got comfortable, and after 3.5 years, um, they ended up having a shift in the way that they had offer support. So support actually was they had 20 at the time 22 offices around the world, and if for pharmaceuticals, for some people that don't know, a lot of pharmaceutical companies are actually based in Europe due to tax whatever the things, and so in the U.S. hours it was actually third shift. So it was hard to replace us with the two support centers that were based in Europe because of that third shift. And so finally they figured it out. We got our severance, and so I had a leeway of 3 months to basically figure it out. Well, if I told you that I prepared myself and I was good after the 3 months and everything hit the road, if you heard my story, that was not the case. I got lazy, I got competent, I was doing what I could. But in reality, what I realized is I needed to ensure that I had project revenue, and I had to make sure that I had monthly recurring revenue. And so I was just kind of hoping that this projects and things of that nature were coming in. So it wasn't until the end of 2017 to about 2018 is really when I started finding my steam. I partnered with a couple of bigger MSPs at the time. I started contracting other subcontractors to do work that I didn't want to do, such as low voltage cabling, camera systems. And so I started growing a lot of project revenue to help stabilize my business as I was going out with the bigger MSP, who since has been acquired, helping us qualify leads that were good for our size but may not be for them. And that's how we started building our base a little bit more till how we got stable. So that's really how what we did and what we kind of did to prepare. I just happened to be a circumstance of that. It was a severance that allowed me to kind of put my feet to the fire once the dollars had left. And then for others, I know that they had the ability of where they have saved over for cash and been able to jump through that way. But what I can tell you is that it really just depends on what type of stress you're willing to go to, and what type of risk are you willing to take. Because you know I always hear that I got to wait till it's the right time, and it's never the right time. Like I will tell you, you can wish that you had everything all said and done. You could have 6 months worth of savings or a severance or whatever, but the moment that that dollar dries out, that's all on you. And that's a very different um, avenue to try and focus on and really driving it home. I can tell you that for us, like when we did our severance, mine was around December and or early December. And so a mentor of mine at the time was like, look, it's the holidays. You're probably not going to be closing any clients anytime soon. You're not in the mindset right now because you're freaking out. Take the next couple of weeks off, relax, have a good time, and then when it comes to January, hit the ground running. And so took that advice, ran through some of those things, and I could tell you it was a lot easier to push it off because I had an end date in mind for those couple of weeks. But my failure was I just felt like, oh well, I'm got a cushion, and I pushed it way too far.
Mhm.
And so what I will tell you is that again, really drive into how you want to do that, and then even if you do have the buffer and you do have the ability to kind of jump, know that that money is not going to last forever. And so you want to make sure you put your things in place. And again, we'll dive into what we would do now to kind of change some of those things. I don't know if there's something that came up for you, Rick, of what you thought, or as you kind of pondered, if I were to do this again, A, would you? And if you would, how would you do it?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Now you have to take this from two sets. I thought about this question. You take it from two mindsets, right? I have 20 plus years. Well, I have 30 plus years now in the industry, right? Going back towards, I'm sure my age a little bit here, but going back towards with my corporate time. So I have a sense of I have that knowledge behind me now. So I definitely know the things I would do differently. Now there are people who are coming into this industry now or contemplating whether they should come in this industry that do not have that experience, right? They then don't have the have maybe they have a corporate background, but they don't have their own running their own business or anything like that. But what I'll say is this: if I had to do it all over again now, I am not in any way, shape, or form going to suggest that it's easier today than it was when I started. I just think that the resources are they're better or the resources are easier to obtain. And if I had to give you, if I had to give anyone any advice today, if you're starting an MSP or any business for that matter, first and foremost, have a plan. Have a plan. Because what I did, my first thing was okay, my plan was I'm going to start a business and fix computers and build computers. That was the plan. Right. I didn't think beyond that. I didn't think about what I'm going to charge. I didn't think about what it was going to cost me. I didn't think about, how much time building a computer or fixing a computer was going to take. I didn't think about whether I need employees. I had a name. I registered the name as I made the first mistake, registered the name as a S corp first, right? Again, not having the business knowledge to think maybe because I'm small, I should have went LLC first. But I didn't consult an accountant, I didn't consult an attorney, I didn't have a business plan. So all of those things I suggest that that's from the business side. I suggest you do a lot of those things. Just have a plan, right? And the resources are available now that we can get a lot of those things just to at least give us um that first step up, right? That first starting point of what I'm doing, what my plan is. And then the other part of this is that now consult someone who's either doing what you're doing or what you want to do, or has done what you want to do. And that they don't have to be an MSP. They just need to be someone who's run a business, an entrepreneur, right? Because I've learned in my years running this business that the business side of this is what always gets lost. What's always got lost from me is I could always fix a computer. I can always figure out a problem. I can always be relentless at doing that. But what I was not good at was when I did all of that, was I charging correctly, right? Was I allocating the time correctly? Was I, not using the right resources? All of those things factor into how you run a business. So I think mentors, I think, are great. I think once I met you guys, start watching the show and hanging out with you guys and listening to you guys, you all became my mentors, right? I grew up, and you guys have heard me say this 1,000 times. My business and me personally grew up through the community, right? Through coming to the Computer Business Podcast, meeting all the people, going out, watching shows, which basically expanded for me what was out there and the resources that were out there to help me grow. So that's going to be my first suggestion. But then again, and then after that, I think, and anyone out there, feel free to disagree with me if you like. The part about coming up with a stack, coming up with a pricing plan, coming up with any of that part of the stuff, I think it comes second to having a plan first, right? I just think that's important. Now, that's me going off of that's if someone came to me now and said, Rick, I want to start an MSP. What would be your suggestion? I would tell you to do those things first. Understand what you want. Put it down on paper somewhere so you can see it. Consult with whoever you have to consult with to make sure your strategy is sound, or at least on the right track. So then, and then understand what the business is you're getting into, and then understand how to run the business. And then you go to the step 2 about, a stack and all of those other things. And then you go to the final step really of actually getting out there and marketing and running the business. But, given today, I would do it that way. I know there's going to be specific questions. What would you use? What would you do? And I honestly just believe it's secondary because let's just be honest. We've all of us here have tried different CRMs, different RMMs, different PSAs, different AVs and EDRs. It's all the same stuff. It's what works for you, what makes you comfortable. and how it fits into what you do, right? So we all know those things, but the shortcoming always is, how do I run the business portion of this? And I think that's where we all should put our first focus on.
I mean, yeah, I agree. I mean, going through LMNOP and trying to figure out all the other acronyms of things that are out there, I think what tends to be lost on us is how to run that business, right? And so there's two frames of mind, right? There are those that are tired of their job and want to leave, right? And have had no type of inkling of what's going on in regards to running a business. Or B, they have been running their business part time and they want to make that jump, right? And so given that those two scenarios are both very different, I will say kind of what you mentioned is that you mentioned, hey, I won't say that it's any easier to run a MSP today than it was back then due to the resources. I would even take that further to say it is extremely harder to take on and run an MSP now versus how it was back then, because you have to get the things right. Things that used to be, going above and beyond are now the standard of what you have to provide as a managed service provider, right? And you're managing services to them. You're providing value added conversations and things of that nature in order to prove that, their investment in you is going to make that much more difference, right? And so, you know, I think from what Rick mentioned is, having a plan first is the first step. I would even take that even further, and I would actually say you want to set up a budget as your first item to do. And if you don't know how to do a budget, find someone to learn. Whether that is your accountant, a financial expert, financial services. I know there's a lot of members from an organization called SCORE in the US, even down to mentors in the space, right? I learned from Juan Fernandez several years ago of how to create a budget, right? And so provided me with a template, understood what this was that. And so for me, what allowed me to do was understand, okay, I have to pay for all of these things across this time frame, and here are the ways I can make the money. And so, how many of each do I need in order to check the box off to have my full house paid for, all set, and then having the profitability, right? And so, that is the absolute first step that I would have taken today, because that would have told me, am I underwater and how I currently have my current clients? Or if I'm jumping in, hey, I need, I don't know, $5,000 a month in order to do my livelihood as we speak on a bare bones method, a $10,000 a month for a bare bones method, right? And so trying to figure out what that number is will allow you to then understand, okay, here's my budget for managed services. What do I provide and what kind of offering or package to help compensate me for the investment of time that I'm doing, along with what do I have to invest to get that going, right? And that's where you hear about automation and things of that nature. I would argue, and Matt Lee from Pax 8 has mentioned this, and Cyber Matt Lee is now the just purely concentrating on the Microsoft environment. There is so much you can do with the Microsoft environment to run your MSP on an automated way and to provide services that you would need less human capital, meaning less hiring to do than you had to 10 years ago. And so for this to say you can only scale if you had this person, you had that person, etc., there are now things that have been built, processes, workflows that have been created to help provide you moving it forward. The second piece that I would do is, what are all the things that I, Paco, need to delegate so that I can do what needs to be done best for the business. So for me, I know I need to bring in sales. I need to sell and bring in more clients. So I personally cannot provide support 24/7, 8 by 5. So for me, in my brain, the fastest to scale on a route to profitability is either A, I need to figure out how to get another technician in, or I need to figure out if there's a group or an outsourced center that I can use so I can give that piece of business over to them. So then now I can offer sales and then I can figure out back office. Then from back office, it's all right, do I need a virtual assistant? Can I hire someone locally part time? How do you provide into that piece so that you can ensure that your back office is running correctly? And by back office, I'm talking about, not so much phones, but making sure that bills are being paid, time is being logged properly, invoices are being tracked properly, your expenses that you have purchased, Microsoft licensing, if you're going through a distributor, any of your tool stack, making sure that whatever you're being charged is being billed appropriately with the proper markup, not margin, markup, and making sure that you have that ability so you can understand your profitability. So these are things that I would do now is delegate those two functions out so that I can focus on the sales to bring more clients in so that I can move forward from there. Now, that's what I'm talking about as far as now. Now that I kind of see what's going on for where the industry is trending to go within 18 to 24 months, my answer is going to be slightly different. But wanted to toss it over to you, Rick, to see if there's anything you wanted to add, or kind of what you would do on that side of how, if it was today, would there
Yeah,
be any difference?
I was thinking about your comment on budgeting, and I think that's important, right? I think you learn it as you go. You learn what to budget for as you go along, right? Because you don't know all the expenses you're going to come up against initially. But I will say this, something to keep in mind. You start a business, you have two responsibilities when it comes to bringing in revenue. One is to the corporation, whether that be to the business. You have responsibility to pay the bills of the business. And you have two, and let me just go back. That paying the bill of the business could be if you have employees, you're responsible for, for their livelihood, for making sure they're paid. So you bring in money for that. That is all under the corporation. Then there's the responsibility to yourself, right? That you need to personally bring home enough money to support your lifestyle. Now you may have to make some choices in your lifestyle, but some of us have families, we have mortgages, we have, car payments, whatever the case may be that you have to pay. You know what you need to bring in every month to cover all of those things, right? So you have those two responsibilities in your budgeting. That is important because I think a lot of times what we do, and I did this, we shoestring everything, right? So it's like, okay, if I don't pay my car note this month, I can push it to next month, or, let me just make enough money to do this, this, and this. And I think that part of the budgeting is what leads you to two things. One is how you price, right? It leads you to know, I need to do this at this cost to bring in this amount of money. I think that's extremely important, first and foremost. Secondly, one of the things you should do is make a decision on who you're going to work with, because now you know this is what I need to make. This is what I need to charge. So these are the people I need to work with, right? Now, I am not one to tell anyone you need to focus on this niche or that niche or niche, this industry, that industry. You can work with 50 industries if you want. But there should be a criteria. They call it, what is it, the buyer's persona?
Yep. Buyer's persona, avatars, ICP,
Right.
ideal client profiles, things of that
Right.
nature.
And that profile can be as specific as you want or a little broader, right? It may just say, I want to work. You have to have 10 employees or more for me to work with you, or 5 employees or more, whatever the case may be. You don't have to necessarily be in these specific industries. That's up to you. I think what tends to happen is, from what I've learned in the conversations I've had with people, you fall into industries, right? You end up doing something, you get good at it, or you get more clients in that industry. You, of course, end up giving it more attention. So you fall into those industries. So I don't necessarily know if we need to say off the back, you need to have specific industries, but you should have specific, a specific profile that you want to work with, so that that is the kind of revenue you can bring in. Because again, it sucks when your numbers are, you shouldn't be making $300 from one client and $3,000 from another client, and you falling all the way in between there, right? Because that $3,000, you lose that $3,000 client, it's got a big impact on your revenue, right? So everyone should be in whatever that, if the middle is $2,000 or whatever, everyone should fall somewhere in there, so that losing a client doesn't necessarily hurt you um, as much as, as it could. So I just say that, keep in mind when you talk about the budgeting, know what your bottom line is, what you need to make. That helps you with your pricing. And then from there, that pricing helps you come up with that ideal client profile. And that ideal client profile helps you be disciplined about who you do business with. And I'm going to offer one more caveat that I learned the hard way. I've said this before. You have to learn to say no. Everyone doesn't need, you don't need to service everyone. Some people don't deserve your business and your time. And you sometimes learn that the hard way because you get burned. But I would say that trying to start out with that level of discipline. And I know it's hard because you got to make money. You got a family, you got a mortgage, you got tuition, whatever the case may be, you got to bring in dollars. But sometimes taking that 10-hour project that really underpaid you has killed you from making real money, or having that time to gain the knowledge to do something else that could have paid you substantially more in the future. So that is probably going to be where I'll leave it at for that.
Yeah, I mean, and the rule that Rick was mentioning is normally a client should not make more than 10% of your revenue, because if it's more than 10%, it will have a very harsh negative impact if that revenue were to disappear. So if you do have someone that's at a $3,000 a client, I'm not saying get rid of them. How do you find other $3,000 clients so that you
Right.
can spread that revenue picture, and so you're not hard, finding hard times to try and replace that revenue in the event of an acquisition, things of that nature. Same thing when it comes down to agreements, right? I've now started to implement annual agreements, and for the mere fact of that reason is I will give them a out, whether it's a 30 or 60-day out to cure the system. But if there's not a relationship that we can, breach to each other, hey, you know what, understanding, we can both walk away if it doesn't make sense. But the point of that is more for the fact of if they were to get acquired, and they sold, the acquiring business can obviously pay you out what you're owed for the remainder of that agreement. That's really the only reason why we started to do that on our side, because we were a big month-to-month agreements, just for the fact of we just didn't want anyone to feel like they were locked into a contract. And so now how it's designed is, hey, if for some reason this is not working between the both of us, totally makes sense. You'll have your out. But if you're acquired, just because the other company does not want to move forward with our services is not a reflection on the way that we providing service. They need to pay the bill. So, and honestly, if it's another company, you probably didn't have the relationship with them anyway, so it shouldn't cause any friction between you and your client because they've been bought. So that's kind of how I see it on that side. The other piece that you had mentioned really specifically is to understand how you want to view, or how do you move forward with running that business, right? And really just figuring out, okay, if I need to figure out, for example, I'll go back to my example where, if you're looking through the budget and you're understanding, all right, this is what I need to do. Okay, in order for me to get my time to profitability, is I would love to support the clients that have 2 or 3 users. I really need to find 5 to 7, 10 or more, 15, 10 to 15 to get to where I need to go faster, right? Or have the ability of, okay, I'm going to provide this monthly recurring revenue, but these are the add ons that I can provide that will help provide me the full scope. Meaning, you get a nonprofit client and they're on Google Workspace and you want to move them to the Microsoft environment. Hey, I can get you free licensing from Microsoft and discounted opportunities, blah, 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 blah. It'll cost this project to migrate you, and we can continue to monitor and maintain your equipment moving forward, right? So that's a project revenue on top of the monthly recurring revenue, right? So there are ways to kind of feel this around and piece it together and understand how you want to move forward from there, right? And so the most important part to understand is that you don't want to do something that you do not feel comfortable with, because as you try to sell something, your face and your vibe and your how you're talking to someone will go through. Like, people read that like it's just bad breath. They will know that you have something going on that does not sound right. And if you're not confident about it or you don't know what you're selling, that's the biggest piece for you to understand, right? And so that's the where you got to figure out, all right, am I a computer technician trying to become a computer business owner? All right, what does that transition look like versus I want to jump and start a business, right? I've been running this for part time. How do I make this full time revenue or full time income so that I can go ahead and make sure that I get paid and everything starts running smoothly? Okay, well, you need to learn how to pay yourself first and not just live on the dribs and drabs, as the Sanford and Son would say, and move forward from there, right? And so these are the things that you will want to make sure that you understand, at least on a present side, right? On what you want to focus on. Because for me, everyone keeps talking about MSP 1.0, 2.0, 3.0 is what everyone's talking about right now. And so this is the managed services space, consolidation of vendors, how to get hands out of pockets, how do you ensure you're providing the right solutions, cybersecurity this, how do you embrace the AI inside of those systems, things of that nature, right? So that's present. For me and my group, we're focusing on the future. And I know this is something that has been kind of laughed about and joked about, but I think it was TechCon Dallas was when it first really opened a lot of people's eyes on what MSP 5.0 meant, to the point where Juan Fernandez, founder of MSP Owners Group, did a whole, what was it, 2 hours?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 2 hours presentation on how you're not leveraging AI properly and what does AI think about you, which is something we've never really thought about, right? And I won't spoil it. If you weren't there, shame on you. Maybe you should be here at TechCon next year once we make the official announcement of where that is. Only the community group knows. So we will make that announcement probably in January. But the big piece about it is that where are we going, right? And you hear AI this and AI that and all kinds of blah blah blah. Um, but currently, what you need to figure out, and the whole point of 5.0 is what are you going to do when what you're doing right now is no longer what you're doing anymore? And what does that mean? This is not a riddle. This is not a whatever. If I told you in 18 months and you were no longer troubleshooting tickets, you're not chasing alerts, you're not having to figure out why you need to replace hardware on an on demand capacity, what would you do? Not only as a technician, because if you are a one person band, if you go ahead and move into the fact of how do you move forward as a business owner, how do you operate not only your business but your staff, but also how do you look into the era of, all right, if managed services came from break fix, what is AI going to do to managed services? Now, I will tell you, there is just the same thing as like what we were trying to figure out with Blu-ray. When there was DVD HD, Sony's Blu-ray, and there were all these devices. And then back even when it was VCRs, Rick can probably attest to VCR, the Betamax, to all those sort of things, right? And
I've seen them all.
everyone loved their flavors. But eventually, there's going to be two things that happen. Either A, there's going to be integrations of AIs, which is what I think is going to happen, or there's going to be a consolidation of AIs as well. The most important piece about the whole thing is that this is going to allow for you to think about what are you going to do. And so Microsoft went out and made a bold claim to say that the employees that are on a lower tier will end up being promoted or moving up into a managerial roles to become agent bosses. And agent bosses are those that are managing these agentic AI. And yes, I know a lot of you throw up in your mouth, but here, stay with me here. because I know that term has been thrown around so many damn times. I can't even keep my head space twisted right. But if you look into this on a genuine, serious level, and you see to a point of understanding, all right, if there's a world where this doesn't exist, how do I provide value? And it's going to be the same reason why you don't make money on selling Microsoft licenses, it's on the services. You don't make money on projects, it's the ongoing value of communication and support of that equipment. It's going to be the same thing here when managed services are should a give me, and they should be required. It's no longer a nice to have. This is what is already known for. Is how do you bridge business and technology together? And so I will leave that with you to understand and figure out what is it that we would do right now as a future MSP. For me, I'm going all in on agentic AI. I'm going to figure out what is the platform that's going to be of my choice, similar to like how I figured out Microsoft is going to be my identity provider, and the identity of a person is what matters to me on a cybersecurity and on a governance standpoint. On an agentic AI side, what is that going to allow? On what platform am I going to sit on for that one, and how am I going to divulge and involve the client inside of that realm? Whether that's a Dataverse, whether that is ChatGPT, whether that's OpenAI. I mean, these are just a very few. Again, I only named three of AIs that are out there, and there are AIs being built right now that I can tell you that we see on LinkedIn talking about a lot of private equity throwing a lot of money inside of what's going to help you as a technician. It will no longer be an augmentation. This is going to be something that is going to be forefront for you to manage. And I believe that if I were to start an MSP today, that's what I would do. I would run into Microsoft 365. I would go into the Microsoft Copilot Studio. I would understand the way that agentic AI is running, and I would move forward to understand how do I continue to provide value to the client so that when I give them a phone call for either the quality business review or a monthly check-in, hey, what are you going through right now? How can we make sure that we help you? And bridging again the business and the technology group to it, and then leveraging how that workflow and processes will go. So that's me speaking on that point, and we got a highlighted piece here as well.
That's from JJub 1313. You can say who that is.
Oh, I think everybody, if you all have been a long time listener, you should know who JJ Dub 1313. And for those that don't know, shame on you. But that is our good friend, former collaborator over here at the MSP Unplugged quote unquote show / network. That is Mr. John Dubinsky, formerly of the Maven Group. And he wanted us to highlight an MSP's core role, say that 3 times fast, is to proactively manage, secure, and optimize a client's IT infrastructure so that the client can focus on their business instead of the technology problems. And that is something that can be summarized to say, yes, 100%. And bridging that ability for those two. Go ahead, Rick.
And I wanted to highlight that for a reason. As we move along, that role doesn't change, but how that role is applied will change, right? And we think, and this is my opinion, right? I don't have any facts to back this up, but this is my belief in the way technology works, the way corporate works. Right now, we think our biggest competitors are each other.
Correct.
But the corporate world, as some of these other businesses, if you think about telephone services, right? Telephony. Okay. Wire's dead, right? It's a dying breed. It's dead. Do you think Verizon, AT&T, and all these people are gonna just sit around and not? They know their clients are moving to VoIP, right? They know their clients are moving to AI, and they're going to be innovative enough to say what other services, and some of them already do this. They offer. We have some. What do you call those? The people who provide internet. What do you call them?
Internet service providers, ISPs.
No, provide internet like a Verizon, Comcast.
An ISP.
An ISP. I'm sorry, it just escaped me. All these damn acronyms. But anyway. Some of these ISPs are offering clients managed services now, right? And they will start offering that based on using um, using AI to help them do that. Again, there's this big thought that AI is going to take jobs. I don't think AI is going to take jobs. I think it's just what you said. I think it's just going to promote the people who've been doing what we would call the core or base level work. They're going to become AI managers, right? That's where your next job should be. So even as MSPs now, what Paco's talking about and what he's is we need to understand the AI. We need to understand what we're doing, how it works, how it fits into our business, and more importantly, how it will fit into our clients' business going forward. So, when we talk about things that we're planning for in the future, and I don't even think we've discussed this, Paco, but we've moved beyond now. What we're doing is we've moved beyond the what do we charge per device or per user or per
Right.
client. We've moved now to because every client is different now. So we no longer what is changing is that you're not going to be able to streamline it that simple anymore. It's
Right.
going to be individual processes for individual companies because everyone's different. And a five user company here um, is not going to be the same as a 5 user company here or a 50 user company, vice versa. One of the things I wanted to go back to really quick in using that strategy now of no longer charging, like thinking about the per user per device model.
It's not going to be
It's
the
okay.
consumption model.
I'm sorry.
I said what you're describing now is we've gone from a static and aggressive type of modeling of pricing, and now we've moved into a consumption-based model for many things that are across the board. Include it started with cloud, and now it's driving into a lot of the other services that we see moving forward.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things I was going to say is you talked about um, a 2 or 3 person user or a 2 person company, right? I'll take a 2 person company if they're going to meet the minimum charges that I have. So if my minimum is 1,500 and they're willing to pay that, then they're a customer, right? But is that consumption model is going to be basically that we're not offering the service based on how many people are in the organization, right? We're offering a service based on what we're doing for you. So I think we just need to, when we think about in the future, when we think about pricing, we need to, consolidate all that. We need to think about that and how we're going to do it because now our costs are going to be based as well on, what we're offering, but what we're building to get them to whatever, level they need to be at. And the infrastructure for a 2 person corporation is just important as it is for a 2,000 person corporation. We just approach it a little different based on what they have, right? But
Right.
it's the same stuff. Or enterprise. We may use a different product for here or there, but it's the same thing. Their needs are exactly the same.
Right.
So their core needs are exactly the same. Let me say that before someone corrects me, because their core needs are exactly the same: to be protected, for us to be proactive, to be able to run their business efficiently without interruption or with little interruption as possible.
Yeah.
But I just think that, as we talk about things, talk about the future and the MSP 5.0, or if you want to skip, we're I guess currently supposed to be in 3.0, and I guess we're
That's
wondering,
the discussion.
yeah, in the interim, when we get to those 18 months, you're talking 18 to 24 months when we make that 5.0, is there a 4.0? Is there a transition?
The 4.0 is what Paxate kind of mentioned, and that is the agentic. What is the agentic crossroads or agentic point? They just did a big thing that we covered this past June. That's kind of where 4.0 is the crossroads of AI and management, and then 5.0 is obviously the future thinking. But yes, I think in 18 months, that is what the conversation is. I think we'll start to see things probably as early as in 6 months, but we will see. I just know that there's a lot of theories, and Canalys or Omida
Yeah.
is the data analysis company on all things IT and MSP over at Informa. And so that's really a lot of where a lot of the stats and where 3.0 and all these things have been discussed for the last year to 2 years. Yeah, again, this is something that has been a trailblazed by quite a few people. 5.0 is kind of where we're looking at on that side. And ultimately, again, it all comes down to, are you a business that is proactive and it brings enough value so that you can ensure that what value you've provided is going to help you make a living and also continue to push the envelope for the business to continue to be able to run as well. So we've talked a lot, and hopefully there was some things in there that you can pick in and find out, and hopefully it can apply to you if you're trying to start an MSP from our history and what we talked about moving forward for. Oh, we got a question here.
Yeah, it was a question.
Um, how do you guys define agentic as it relates to the MSP space? What are your agentic expectations when 5.0 arrives? Well, that's a very good question. What is your wish list on that, Rick?
I was gonna let you go first.
That's fine by me. So I think what how we define agentic, right, as it relates to the MSP space is that they're going to be similar to what the GPTs are kind of running right now on a reactive basis, but also it's going to be running on its own. It's going to be that combination of workflows and processes that it's specifically just doing the things, right? I think there's a platform you have used that probably you could speak on that's similar, which is Centra. And that's something where these are several multiple AI employees that are doing specific tasks that you have assigned, and it's doing it on its own. So obviously it's a cross between workflows and automation, but in essence this model language, this LLM, is actually thinking and doing the things that it should be doing, right? And so when it comes to how do we define agentic AI as it sits in the MSP space, they're going to be little robots doing the things that people have been doing before. That's the best way for me to dumb it down and say it. But there's more in depth to that specifically. But you're going to see tech teams manage several AI bots on monitoring, patching, and management of systems when it comes across to networking, to endpoints, to down to SaaS alerts that may be happening, not the vendor, but the actual, SaaS kind of alerts, and all those things in between. You're going to see marketing teams that are going to be having managing of social media and all the marketing items that were previously scheduled, but now have a task list that they come into the morning on questions or things that should have been done and send them on their way as if they were speaking to actual employees. That's how I would see the agentic portion of the MSP space happening for the quote unquote agent bosses to manage.
And I think it's important when we think about that, we have to keep in mind two things. And I keep saying this because it's important to know. You have to know what goes into your agentic AI, what goes there, right? Because again, we get, and I learned this from Neil deGrasse Tyson, we're always going to be needed. AI thinks based on what the knowledge is it has, right? You run a business, you have a culture you want to fulfill, a business culture you want to fulfill. You have the way you want to do things, your way of doing things, your approach, all of those things. This is why you still have the people who manage the bots, right? Because those things have to be quote unquote taught to the AI. And I think it's important that we remember that, because we don't want to walk away with this vision that you can go now to Pax8's marketplace and buy an AI bot and it just runs your business and you're great, right? Or, in the 5.0, so in 18, 24 months or whoever you go to, and you can buy it and it just runs the business. It's going to be essentially like anything else. It's going to have baseline qualities, what it knows, and then everything else it has to learn, right? And who teaches it? You teach it. And that's why you still need, I think, one of the most probably I guess it goes back to when I said again about starting a business, right? You got to have a vision, because all of this stuff goes right back to your vision. How do you want it to be? What do you envision? What do you see when you close your eyes and when you look 4, 5, 10 years down the line? What do you see? And then that determines how you do things, right? And I think it's just important that we think about someone. We think about hiring now. We want to more so look at people who have vision and not just. We want more than doers. We want thinkers,
right?
And I think that's important to think about, as we look to the future. And it's going to be. I don't know how much longer I'm going to be a part of this. I'll maybe around when this 5.0 hits, but yeah, I'm sure I will be. But
I think it will be a very interesting for the next 5 years, once we get to 2030, it'll be a very different world than what we're living in right now.
Right.
And to round out this show, I will leave you with this on, we've been asking, hey, what do we think how AI is going to do X, Y, Z, etc. But what do you think AI thinks about your MSP? So I want you to go ahead and search that and ask it, hey, what's an MSP you would suggest, or a couple MSPs or top MSPs that you would suggest in the X area, whether that is like in Chicago, it's a metro neighborhood. You could put the city, you could put the township, and see if you come up. And then the question you're going to ask it afterwards, when you don't come up, is why wasn't I on that list? And you'll be surprised on what those results are going to be. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and round out this episode here. And unless you had something to add on to that, Mr. Smith.
No, I think that's perfect. That ask the why. I think that's important.
Ask the why, and you'll be surprised. And I would like you to let us know what it says so that we can continue this conversation. But if you love what you're hearing here today and what you look from there, tune in every week. You can catch us on the video podcast on youtube.com/MSP Unplugged. Like, subscribe, and hit that notification button to be notified whenever a new episode is available. You can also take us with you on the go on your favorite podcatcher app. Head over to mspunplugged.com. We can see Amazon Music, Spotify, and on Apple Podcasts, to name a few. We will have some announcements here about TechCon Unplugged. But once again, we appreciate you for listening in. If any comments, any new details, any emails, we will make sure to address those in the next episode. And we will see you next time on MSP Unplugged.